So how are things going otherwise?
Things are well. Yeah, I can't complain. Yeah, staying very busy. I can yeah, I think it seems like this year, towards the end of last year, things were slowing down a little bit, but it's picked right back up. And I don't know if that's the transition of budgets or like the calendar years for businesses have
I would
shifted
think
so
so.
that yeah, there's been this kind of unlock of budget. So yeah, things have been moving along really well. I really can't complain, honestly. It's been fun, and I really love the clients that I'm working with right now. So it's kept things interesting, I'd say.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've been doing this for a
Yeah.
couple years now though, right? So has it been like has that wind down happened at the end of the year previously, or was that like a new thing this year?
Yeah, I think so. It changes every year. It's some years again it goes back to the budgets and what's going on in the economy as a whole. It's interesting. You can kind of track how things are going based off the economy. You can kind of figure out how teams are scaling back or budgeting. And I think what's interesting is when, there are some tougher economic times, it actually, in consulting, some companies do lean on consultants, single firm consultants or a single person
Oh,
to kind of help, take them through that rough patch. So it's interesting the way that it works. So it
huh.
goes either way. But a lot of times at the end of the year, there's budgets that people have that they either need to use up or they're kind of, you know, trying to figure out what's going on with the next budget for Q1, Q2 the following year. So it's an
Right.
interesting time going through kind of the September, October, November timeframe. And then that kind of feeds into what's happening now, the kind of end result.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. We had a project we're working on right now where the customer that we were working with asked us to split the PO between I think February 29th and March 1st so that they could land the project on two different fiscal budgets.
Yeah, it's wild how that works, but that's the
Yeah, yeah.
way the businesses work, and it works if you kind of understand that. I think that is what's fun about diving in. It's a little bit outside of the realm of design, kind of the standard perception of what design means, but to like step out and look at your company's financials, especially if your company is listed on the stock market, you can go through and actually dive into some of the financial documents of the competitor companies, your company, and actually start to, understand what's actually happening behind the scenes because you're not
Right.
always privy to what's happening. It's just kind of happening around you. But seeing some of the financial data is interesting. And there's so many YouTube videos out there now to help describe what's going on in the quarterly financials. And those documents are available for any of those publicly traded companies. Just go on their
Right.
website and they're available. So it's interesting to dive into.
That is interesting. I never thought to look up like a YouTube to kind of like get a better breakdown of that because I feel like sometimes those year-end reports can be so confusing and there's a
Yeah,
lot of it's just a lot of there's a lot of numbers and graphs and as a
right.
designer my eyes just kind of glaze
Yeah,
over a little bit. It's like,
yeah,
okay, are we still the machine is still moving? Yes. Okay. Okay,
right.
good.
Exactly. Yeah, I would say like 99% of the stuff I just kind of gloss over. It's yeah, when the YouTubers would tell you like these are the things to look for. And it's fascinating when you look at some of the competitor products. Like you can go on if there's a competitor that is listed and see what their research and development budgets are, how much they spent on
Oh, wow.
marketing or all that content and data is available to you. You just got to dive into it, and that those documents do get rather thick, but it is
Wow.
still fun to kind of yeah try to understand it and see things that are happening around you at in a larger perspective.
Dude, that's amazing. You're playing like four-dimensional chess. So are you doing that like in design projects? Are you looking up like competitors' budgets and
Yeah,
financials?
it's an interesting tool, and I don't typically bring it up in projects, but it just gives you a different picture of actually what's happening. So if you sign up a new client, it's worthwhile to run through their financials for the past couple of quarters and just see where they're at because
Wow.
some of it actually doesn't come out in conversation right away. You start to get a sense of what's going on in the meetings. You have, brand individuals coming in or marketing people coming in, and you don't really get that sense of the company's direction or how things are headed. And you really get that from these financial statements. And it just gives you, I would say it's just some extra arrows in the quiver to provide you a little extra data. So when you go into those conversations, you get a sense of what's happening with the business.
Yeah, that is
It's
interesting. It's funny you mentioned that. I was thinking about it more from like an internal perspective, but that makes so much sense as a consultant because I feel like when you jump between companies, there is that like ramp up period of just trying to figure out like the language that the organization speaks, like the way they think about design, like how they probably view you as a consultant, and like anything you can do to like speed up or shortcut that process seems
right. Yeah.
like such a smart move.
And it is, I will say, it is dry. Those documents are very dry, and
Right, right.
sometimes, yeah, it's easy to kind of get lost. But there are certain things to look for, and you can actually, you just do a search for certain items within these documents, and it just gives you a better sense. And there's also ways to just kind of look at larger, graphs of what's going on with the company and the stock price, obviously too. It gives you a sense of what's going on. A lot of times it's interesting when I get into kind of the innovation space. If you look at the stock price of a business and they've consistently been going down in their stock price for a number of quarters, when you reflect on the type of innovation that they're looking for, they're not necessarily looking for innovation. Not every company, and again, I'm kind of painting with broad strokes here, but not every company is looking for innovation that's going to happen 5 to 10 years out. It's hard to, show people design for a new shed in the backyard if the house is on fire. It's kind of one of
Right.
those, you got to adapt and change the type of innovation that you're presenting. And so if I see that a business is kind of hurting in the short term and their focus is more on, short-term wins, that changes the scope of what innovation is presented or what concepts are presented. Let's try to get early wins so that way we can do kind of these longer term projects. So I think it puts things in perspectives and maybe changes the way you think about how you present to companies and also the type of work that is worthwhile to present to a business. So it's
Yeah,
and not every company is listed, so it's hard to, you kind
sure.
of you also learn a lot about the business from the conversations with those who are hiring you. But I think it's true for people who are working internally too at a company, just to keep an eye on that. And it's not something you look at daily, but
Yeah,
to just have a peek into how the business is doing.
that's really cool. I'm probably going to do that at some point now that I'd never considered that before. That's interesting. So how many clients have you taken? So how I guess like maybe back up a little bit. How long have you been consulting for now? Because it's been a few years, right?
Yeah, maybe yeah, so I can go back just a little bit. I've been consulting for 4 years. I thought it was three, but the time is kind of
Right.
flying by. I got a LinkedIn notification that it was 4 years. And
Yeah,
it's
the
actually
COVID timeline.
yeah, right. Yeah, so it's actually just about 4 years now. Was the 18th? I think the 16th is the 4 year mark um
Nice.
of January. And so I started right after basically end of 2019. I considered I was working at Newell Brands at the time, and I had this opportunity to kind of go out on my own, and it's kind of an itch that I always wanted to scratch. It was something that was always in the back of my mind. And so it was a time where I felt confident that we were actually relocating from the New York City area up to Boston. My wife got a job up at Bose, and so it was a good opportunity for me to kind of rethink how I was, where I was working and what I was doing, and then COVID happened, so it was a little bit of tough going initially, but I think we all saw in businesses that towards the middle to later half of that year, 2020, it was we couldn't keep things on pause from an innovation standpoint, a product development standpoint, especially seeing how many people were still purchasing product.
Right.
There's a high demand, and so companies kind of kicked back off with development. So the business did really well towards that second half of the year.
Yeah, I feel like ID as a whole was kind of on fire during the pandemic. There were a lot of companies that were just staffing up and a lot of businesses that were kind of exploding for better or
Yeah.
for worse. I mean, a lot of the industries that I saw grow in like 2020, 2021. It seems like they still haven't really declined that much, or they're at least still riding that high. Um, so yeah, it's been interesting. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd say it's tough for some of those businesses that really were leveraging, I'd say some of the e-commerce or direct to consumer businesses, those have kind of shifted as well. The business dynamics have changed a lot. Import costs have gone up. There's so
right.
many changes to the economy and the way different businesses were structured pre-pandemic to they are to how they're structured now. It's shifted how businesses work and the margins they're making on project products, and so I think that has changed the dynamic quite a bit with some of these D2C businesses that really took off.
Hmm.
Now they're kind of struggling and trying to find their feet in this kind of new economy. It's been interesting to watch.
That's awesome. Huh. Yeah, it is interesting. Um, yeah, I know I don't work with plastics anymore, but I know resin costs were also like really high for a while
Right.
there. Um,
Yeah, and there's tariffs on products still, so
yeah,
that's changed, shifted, and yeah, it's kind of it's created a different, I'd say, a different dynamic, especially for those D2C companies. And then also social media has shifted in the way that you present product, and a lot of those big competitors are actually starting to understand how to present on social media. So it's created a very difficult climate back, I'd say before 2020. If you look at the prices to acquire new customers, it was a little bit cheaper because social media was kind of this newer way to present your product, and it was a lot less expensive to present your product in front of a lot of people. And that's why you saw so many D2C businesses really skyrocket and start
right.
eating some of these larger businesses that have existed for some years started eating their lunch. And so it was fascinating to watch. But now those costs for social media to get, eyes on your product have gone up significantly. And so
Really?
it's starting to change the way that companies can present themselves and market themselves. And now you really want that
Hmm.
organic growth, which is very challenging. You really, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of companies need to kind of rely on that, because the cost of doing business and getting your product in front of eyes is so much higher.
Wait, so when you say the costs are going up, what is that referring to specifically? Is it like social media agencies that are putting the product out there, or like what is the like what are you paying for basically?
Yeah, ad costs. So
Mm.
to get your product in front of various consumers, you're spending money. I mean, it's really, Google is such a huge tax because it's basically you have to spend money with Google. You have to spend money with Facebook and Instagram. And so these companies are spending so much money to get your product in front of consumers, and then your prices go up significantly because your margins start to go down as your
Hmm.
costs go up from a social media's perspective, or getting trying to get that product out there. And so that's where that organic growth, it's so difficult and challenging because you really want that from the ground up. You want people to get excited about your product, but it's like, can you create a guerrilla marketing campaign? And
Yeah.
be like, you can't really do that. That's something that happens when you have a great product, and people are excited about it and they start talking about it.
And great people, I would think. Like like having a really great marketeer who's like willing to kind of go that extra mile and give a lot of themselves. Um, do you get into like those that kind of level of work when you're consulting as far as like talking about like do you get into like go to market strategies and like that type of those type of growth conversations when you're coming in and working with a company, or are you kind of just observing this from the outside?
I'd say it's an observation more than it is an engagement from that level, because I think it's like, opening up your understanding of what's happening on around you. Like, what are the disciplines that work, within marketing, or what the disciplines? Obviously, we work so closely with engineering, and I feel like that's something
Right.
designers have been used to for so many years. I think understanding what's happening from a financial standpoint, like we were talking about earlier, what's happening, um, you know, from the economic standpoint, what's happening in the global economy with the products that you're working on. I think just those little details kind of help to give you a broader picture of the product you're developing. And it's not something that, you're spending too much time on where you're really typing like that. You could really get lost if you're, working on and trying to understand the full picture. There's other people who are doing that, but just being able to speak that language, or when you see some of those financial sheets that come up and graphs that come up in some of the presentations about the products that your company that you're working for is developing, it just gives you that better picture and a holistic view of what's happening. So I think,
Hmm.
I don't know, just understanding some of these other aspects, which is I think is more and more challenging, because as designers, there's so many tools, especially with AI tools right
Right.
now, that we're diving into so much, because there's such a huge change in the way that we're developing product because of that, that there's like, there's these other areas that are worth exploring too, and diving into to give you that full picture.
Have you I'm curious, have you had a chance to like go into any of that? Because I know like the last time we were catching up for coffee or lunch or whatever, you were sort of asking a couple questions about it, but hadn't really explored anything yet. Have you had a chance to try out like Midjourney or any of those tools yet?
Oh yeah, it's been yeah, been diving into that a lot over the past, 6 months to a year. It's been
Nice.
I think it's helped so much. And um to so stepping back, I think one of the things that's a challenge, and I think is easy to get lost in, is as a designer, I think we get so excited about these tools that are out there. And the visuals and the creation is so exciting. But you think about the spectrum of what we do in industrial design, it is such it's a smaller gamut, I think, is that kind of that piece of it. You think about your day-to-day job, how much of it is, developing out the design language of this kid. There is a significant amount of time you spend on that, but I think there's also all this other time spent in all these other facets of what industrial design is. And so I'm trying to balance. I think there's so many talented individuals that are out there. You've had them on the show um already. It's like understanding what products are out there, and watching what they do and how they use the
Right.
products, I think is really helpful. I think it's a huge benefit to us, because you and I, we can't necessarily spend the amount of time that they can spend on just understanding the product. And you know, you have tasks that you have to complete in your day-to-day job. And so you also, in the back of your mind, you're thinking you need to keep up on it with artificial intelligence, AI, and all the different products like Midjourney that are out there. And how do you do that if you're not engaging with it daily? And I think that's why I'm so appreciative of those individuals who are out there that are really diving into it and providing us with content. And here's what you need to know. And I would say that's the best use of time, almost, when as a designer, is to start, just watch those individuals who are really diving into it deeply, but don't forget about all these other aspects of design that are
Yeah.
so critical, to the development cycle.
Yeah, it's good advice. It's funny. I just a couple days ago I had Hector Rodriguez on here and we went
Yeah, that's who I'm
just
thinking about.
super deep
Yeah.
on AI, and I feel like he's like a really good person to follow. He does a good job of kind of like curating down and like really thinks about like the perspective he has on things before he kind of communicates it, and I feel like that's been really helpful so far. But yeah, it's a
Right.
good
Yeah.
perspective. I think it's so easy to get like lost in the sauce with I feel like any sort of like art tangential discipline, whether it's like 3D, like you could just like I think the first question I always see pop up when anyone posts like really great work is there's always like 5 million comments of just like what tool is this?
Right.
Everybody's always
Yeah.
looking for like the next like magic tool that's going to solve all of the problems, and at the end of the day it's just like not really the way it works.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so appreciative to what Hector Rodriguez is doing and some of the other individuals who are really diving into it, because there's new tools that are launching, and each tool is changing so dramatically month by month. And so when you're kind of caught up in the development cycle of your business, or you're trying to produce product, or you have deadlines you're trying to hit and gates on the products that you're working on, or you're managing clients, it's so challenging to keep up with that. And so to have somebody like Hector who's really diving into it, paying attention to what he's doing and how he uses the tools, and using that as kind of the jumping off point. And of course, if you're interested in it, definitely exploring it, but knowing that there's so many other facets of the process. And I think I watched part of what your conversation with Hector, and one of the things he mentioned that I appreciated too is that there's different areas where AI is also assisting the design development process,
Right.
and so that's changing too. So all these things that we do, AI is starting to help out, but understanding that it's really difficult to like dive in. You learn one of these tools really, really well, and then another one pops up that does something different that you also need. Now you can learn that. There's all these other things that designers do that we also need to stay relevant and good at. So it's, I think, leaning on the support that individuals like Hector offer, I think is really beneficial for designers. Unless, of
Yeah.
course, you're super into it. It's like, why
Right.
not,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Which,
Once yeah, if it's fun, then it's fun, and that's
right.
a different conversation, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
I
if it's
just,
a part of your workday and you're budgeting time for like learning and or like personal development or learning or whatever it is, then that's like a very different scenario.
yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on, especially designers right now, because those tools are changing so quickly. I think there's a lot of pressure on us to stay relevant and up to date with those tools. And so, really leaning on those individuals to help you get to that point, I think is important. And we're not getting paid by 39% to promote him, but I think it's worthwhile to lean on, because there's, like I said, there's so many other facets of design that are critical, and I think that pressure can get overwhelming, and you can easily get lost in some of the mid journey tools and some of these
Yeah.
other tools that are launching and new.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually curious to ask. I haven't really asked anyone else this question, but because you mentioned like time management a few times, I'm just kind of wondering what your perspective on that is as a consultant, because I feel like it would I imagine most consultants probably keep strange hours or would tend to like go long hours. I'm just curious, like when you set out I don't know if there's been a big change between when you set out and now, but like what is the conclusion you've kind of come to as far as like how you manage your time during the day and like yeah, how do you schedule your day out?
I appreciate working under pressure. So I think having deadlines and projects that are consistent meetings that I have to join with clients,
Mm,
that helps kind of keep a level of pressure on the work output. But it's a good question, because I feel like we are constantly adjusting and changing how we work and time manage, because I think it's an evolution for me right now. Where I've landed that I find really beneficial is that I use Google Calendar, but I block out my day. So in the morning, I'll chunk out my day with kind of meetings on the calendar, but it's really just working sessions that I can understand. Like I look at my calendar, I say, okay, I have these meetings. Where are the bigger blocks of time that I can really dive into a project? And then
mm.
I strategically will block out certain sections. And it's different for everybody. Some people are really energetic and engaged in the morning, and that's where they have to do those kind of the tough jobs. And so you
Right.
have to figure out what is best for you. But that has worked for me, is to like kind of block out the day, and then it takes a bit of the pressure off. So if I know that I have multiple clients, typically all always kind of going at the same time. So if I have a deadline coming up for one of the clients, it kind of puts that pressure on, but it also makes me it kind of can distract me from other projects that I'm working on. So just knowing that I have a time blocked out in the calendar is helpful. And then I use Harvest to help track. If you haven't heard of it, it's an online tracking tool that I find really beneficial, because it links up with Google Calendar, and then you can just go in there and it'll feed in everything that's in your Google Calendar, and you can kind of dedicate it to different projects, and then it will track. If you have a certain amount of hours that you need to
Oh
put
wow.
towards a project, or you have a certain budget that you have to hit, then it'll keep track of that stuff, and then it will send you an email, hey, you're
Oh man.
at 80% of the hours for this project. Or it just
Oh wow.
I yeah, I just switched to that in November, and it's been so helpful, because
Yeah.
before I'd be working on a project, I might run out of hours and still be working on that project without realizing that I've overcommitted or undercommitted, or like, I've blown past the hours that I thought I need, I thought I had spec'd. And so to
Right.
have a tool like that that kind of runs in the background and is keeping track of what's going on is super helpful.
That's
So
really
that,
cool. Yeah,
yeah, those are the
will it give
tools
you
that,
back like percentages of like, hey, you're spending 30% of your time stuck in meetings, or is it more like is it more like it sounds like it's more numbers, like 20 hours this, 15 hours this.
right. Yep. It's that. Yeah. And
Okay.
it gives you some visual graphs. I guess designers were definitely visual people. So it gives you graphs of kind of the breakdown. So, what I heard from, I think Michael DeTullo actually told me this years and years ago was that, the average from a consulting standpoint, what you want to aim for is kind of a two-thirds, one-third. So one-third of your time is dedicated to, just development work, kind of
Right.
presenting yourself, marketing, some of those tasks like billing, stuff like that. And then two-thirds is actual billable work. And so now having this tool like, Harvest or, tracking my time in Google Calendar helps me understand like where am I at. So within the past 6 months, I was actually roughly in the 70% to 30% mark. So I was kind of in that realm.
Nice.
And it feels good to be able to look back because before
Yeah.
before November, I had no clue what was going on. You're just hoping that you're
Yeah.
hitting the numbers and you're not gonna, blow past. And that's not the best way to work. But um I think it's interesting when you're working as a consultant, you're kind of going out on your own. You have to figure out what's important and what tasks you need to resolve. And sometimes they just pop up like some issues that you have as a business. They'll just pop up when they need to be resolved immediately. Like that was a good example. So I was doing a project and I had blown past those hours and I had to tell the client, but I had to cut back on the project work, but I also had to kind of absorb some of that because it was a bit of my fault because I had gone past the hours and I didn't inform them. So it was something where it's, having this tracking tool eliminates those potential issues. But as a solo business owner, you kind of some of these issues pop up and then you realize didn't realize that was an issue I needed to solve. And then all of a sudden it's there and you need to get it, fix it quick.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, that's really fascinating. The job I'm at now is the first time I've ever had to bill hours. It's kind of the way we
Oh yeah.
operate just as a design team. And it's been a huge learning curve, like way more than I would have anticipated. It sounds like so simple on its face of like, oh, you just work the number of hours it takes to do the project and then you build the hour, but it's like so
Right.
much more complex than that. It just as far as like the stakeholders you're relating to, like the way you're trying to like estimate projects. um yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting
It's
for
a
sure.
challenge. It's another aspect of design. In some businesses, I did work at a business where they, back when I was working at a agency consulting firm, we did the same thing. We were billing out
Oh, right.
hours, and even on internal projects, we were doing the same thing. And it gets challenging too, because sometimes when you're not billing it against projects, but it's internal, to remember to bill out those hours is kind of challenging. It's like it's one of those things where it's in the back of your mind, but it's not necessarily something you think about because you're thinking about the projects. But I think what's interesting is when you look at those numbers, just like I'm doing with Harvest, looking back and seeing what's going on in my business, the same thing's happening at these larger firms or larger companies. They see that they're weekly, they're seeing how individuals are, billing per project or how many hours they're working towards a project, and it helps sell internally the potential to hire new people. So it's like
uh
getting your hours in is actually really critical to help you out if you want to have additional people on the team or you want to it's like a good way to for management to sell in that you guys are overworked or it but if you're not putting the hours in then it's really difficult to do that. So seeing it from the other side of you know the other perspective, it's so critical to get hours in, which is you don't think about it when you're busy trying to get work done at some of these bigger businesses though.
yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah, it's way more of a backbone than I would have anticipated for sure.
Yeah, it is.
um Well, that's really cool. Yeah, I'm really happy for you. I mean, congratulations on 4 years. That's a long time. I
Thank
was
you.
speaking with like a small business owner just near where I live the other day, and they were telling me that when you're starting a business, it seems like they call it like the 3 year hump, like getting your kind of like your first 3 years under your belt is sort of the mark. That's where you like start to establish like consistency and you kind of like you know what you're doing enough to be able to like continue for a long period of time. So be able to
Yeah.
like hit that 4 year mark is like you're in it, like you're out there and you're killing it.
And I
That's
thought it was a
great.
3 year mark, so I'm glad I didn't realize that. 'Cause the pressure would have been
Right,
really, yeah.
right.
I would have been stressing, that three
Yeah.
year mark, but I guess I had passed that.
At 2 years and 10 months, and you're
Yeah.
just shaking.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely been a journey, and it's a learning experience. I think um yeah, there's so many, I think, just going back to like the time tracking, and there's so many challenges that kind of come up with businesses. I've had a lot of people reach out to me too about how do you start, how do you go out on your own, or what's the
Right.
process to kind of get started. Because it is a risk. I think I sometimes I think at least in the first 2 years, it was still shocking to me that I actually made the jump and was out on my own. It was kind of almost felt like a foreign idea, which was pretty
Yeah.
wild because I spent so many years working at big companies and consultancies. Um, but it's been really rewarding, and it's not necessarily something for everybody. But it is a blast, and I would recommend it's something to consider anybody who's really thought about it a lot. But you need to have a big network in place. You need to have, know a lot of people. And I think that's where I feel like I've been building this business, not for 4 years, but for maybe 10 or 15 years, because it's all
Right.
about the relationships you've built over time and those people that you know. And a big part of the business that I have, most of it's from people that I've worked with in the past, or I've known from past events, or have networked with, or even just grabbed coffee with over the years.
Yeah, I think too, you're a very nice person and you're a very humble person. So I know you won't say this, so
Thank you.
I'm going to say it. You're also extremely talented. I think you're one of like I'm gonna kind of I'm gonna tell you this, but I think you're one of the best industrial designers that I have ever worked with across my career. Like
I
your
appreciate
skill
that.
is very, very high. Like I was just looking today and I saw that you I think you redid your website recently, or at least you redid it between the last time I saw it and when I checked it just now. And I think that your work speaks for itself on a lot of levels. Like when I came into Newell, your like Dymo labeler project, which is on your website for anyone who wants to check it out, but that was considered like the process standard. So like when they would onboard people, that was the project they would show us of like this is how if you want to deliver a project and do it right, like this is how you do it. So your work is kind of put, I think, on that pedestal a little bit. And then I don't know if you're still consulting there, but at the time, like when I was at Newell, you were consulting there, and I feel like it was always like really it's inspiring to have you in critiques. Like it was always very motivating. Like I pin my work up and I kind of be looking at over on like Miro at Craig's work in the corner. I'm just like, ah shit. Like I gotta step it up a little bit.
Oh man,
Like
yeah, I
Craig is just
appreciate
killing it.
that. I really appreciate that. It does mean a lot. It's crazy because there's still imposter syndrome. I mean, you still feel like you're not really, the work. I think it's still, like, to your point, I guess that's part of being humble. But it's like you always feel like there's so much great work out there, including your work, and
Right.
it's like a challenge to feel like you need to keep up. And there's so many, again, a lot of the people who are posting and putting out content, it puts a lot of pressure on you to feel like you need to be contributing to that level. And I think there's this whole other side of, the development work that I'm so impressed with those individuals who are constantly creating content like yourself. It takes a lot of time and it takes energy out of the day, and you're really contributing back to the community in a big way. And I'm so appreciative of it because it is a challenge. It is a big challenge.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I will say this is a pretty loose ship that I'm running here. This thing is like held together with cardboard and duct tape.
No, I'd say more than
But
that.
I'm trying to make it a little better
Staples.
every week. Every week I kind of take a piece of duct tape off and I put like some Phillips head screws and a piece of wood there.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying. I feel like between Instagram and Behance and like all of these other platforms, and especially now with like this wave of like all these crazy AI images, it is so easy to feel like a small fish in like a big pond.
Hmm.
Um, for
Yeah.
sure. I'm curious to
You're
ask
doing,
though,
yeah.
like did you did you have a lot of background in like art and design before becoming a designer? I'm curious to like unpack like what is like the Craig like how was the sausage of how was Craig's sausage made? But like did you have a
Yeah.
background in art and design or did you kind of like how did you really develop your skill set? Was it like in that early consulting work or I'm just curious like how did you get to the point where you are now?
I think so. So growing up, it was an area that I always kind of spent time in. I was always doing art projects. My mom in particular was always pushing, for, art work around the house. Like we had a desk set up with all these art tools that I could play around with. And so it was an area for expression, I think personally. And so I think that bled into all the, every grade as I was kind of growing up. I love the art class. I love, going and spending the hour painting or whatever that, it was just like, it was a way for me to focus and kind of, and I think apply my energy.
Yeah.
Um,
Did your folks have a background in like visual arts at all or were they visual people as well? Like I'm
yeah,
like
I think
because if they were promoting it, I'm assuming they place some value in it.
Yeah, and it was like kind of, they were supportive of whatever we were interested in growing up, and I just had this kind of affinity to art, and so they really kind of supported that and supplied a lot of those kind of tools and classes if I was interested in it. To a certain degree, so my father, he passed when I was 5. So I was rather young, so I didn't really get to see some of the work that he had created, but he was an engineer by trade. And so I think that was maybe in the back of my head. And then my mom also studied art history, and she always kept kind of art around, art books. And so it was something that
Mhm.
we were always surrounded by. So I think there's some natural osmosis that happened to some
Yeah.
degree. But
Yeah.
I was also fascinated with I love cars. So we go down to the Javits Center. I grew up north of New York City, and so when the auto show would come around, we'd go down to the Javits Center, and I'd love checking out the cars. So it was kind of, I went into I went to College of Creative Studies for automotive design initially, and luckily found out
Oh.
about product design freshman year, and that's kind of what kind of led me down that path. But initially, it was because I wanted to merge my passion for art and my passion for vehicles, and I was like, why not? I sent a letter when I was younger to the head of design for Lamborghini, and they wrote a note back to me.
Wow.
I don't know where the note is though. I wish I still had it. I have no clue. It's probably buried in a bin somewhere. But they actually wrote back to me, which I was like, I was kind of completely blown away with. And so it was just something that I was so excited about, and that's why I went to Detroit, because I was just, okay, well, I have to go to the center of the
Yeah, Motor
automotive hub.
City.
Yeah, Motor City. So that's that was kind of the background and how I landed in product design. But even in school, I don't feel like I was always feeling like I had to, catch up with all the peers around me. It was always there was kind of this pressure, this sense of pressure from, the teachers and the students around you, which I also, like I said earlier, I kind of worked well under pressure. So having that around me was beneficial to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I wonder if it's funny you're telling that story. I wonder if kids still write letters to companies. I guess it would probably just be like messaging companies on social media now. Would be like the
Yeah,
equivalent of
maybe.
that. But it's funny, I think I did that too. I remember I think I wrote a letter to like to some art schools when I was a kid or something
Oh,
I was
really?
like, I'm interested in drawing, but I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
How do I make a living with this? And I so
Right.
it's not as cool of a story, but they just sent back like it was like a packet of like what the school offered and like the different classes. I remember like laying on the
That's
floor
cool.
and flipping through that thing and thinking like, oh yes, like looking at different curriculums. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's
In
interesting.
a way, it shrinks the world a little bit because
Yeah.
when you reach out and then you're getting a response from a business of that scale, you're kind of, or a school or somebody sends you something and engages with you, it makes it feel like you can really, maybe it's achievable. It's something that you can actually do.
Yeah, it makes
I
it
think,
real as opposed to like a high fantasy or something. Like,
right.
you're thinking
Yeah.
Ferrari and Italy and like it's like this far away dream, but then as soon as they kind of engage with you on some level, it's like it immediately becomes real.
Right. Exactly. I think another story too, I want to tell real quick. When I was
Yeah.
younger in middle school, I had this teacher, fantastic teacher. Her name was Mrs. Bass, and she had this class where all these different projects, but one of the projects I remember very clearly was to develop out our own calendar, which doesn't necessarily sound exciting, but you were able to kind of theme it out. But it was my first realization that like you could shift and change the world around you, that like everything around us was created by somebody at some point or some time. And so the fact that you could take something like a calendar that was, everybody uses it, it's got the same number of days and every month, and it's got basically the way that she broke it down is you could name each day whatever you want. It had to land at 365, but
Wow.
you can create as many months as you want. You could rename the months and you can create your own holidays. And so just that sense that you could take something that exists and that's just kind of like standard across the world and you could change it and do something on your own, I think was such a cool way to change that mentality in my mind that, if it exists, then that's it, and I can't do something different. And so having that experience kind of shifted that mentality, I think, in my mind. And it was a project that I'll never forget. I still have the calendar somewhere. It's probably sitting next to the Lamborghini note
Yeah,
smoke.
yeah. It's all in the
They're in
same
the same
it's
bin
all in the same
somewhere.
cardboard box at the bottom of a pile of five cardboard boxes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to like try to do that project now and then it like do that project and then dig out your old one and like see if any of
Yeah,
the day like you think of the same days or
that
or
would be
not.
crazy.
But
Yeah.
those are my favorite types of projects as a designer are the briefs where it feels like it's everything's already been done. And then like you're like it's like that hunt for the unique combination of influence or whatever it is that like nobody's brought to the table yet. Like right now I'm working in lighting, which I mean electric lamps have been around for like literally hundreds of years. So you kind of get this feeling like there's a rich history to it, but there's also been a lot of innovation and a lot of people trying things over the years. But I don't
Yeah.
know, it feels like it's such an interesting challenge. I feel like that exercise highlights it really well, where like at the end of the day, you will always have some unique perspective or combination of life experience or whatever it is that you're bringing to the table that will kind of like add something to that like bigger narrative.
Yeah, 100%. I love looking at architecture too for the same reason. You look at new buildings that are being developed in some of the big hubs around the world, and you think about it, there's a lot of standards that exist and buildings have been created for so many years, but to see something new and how they're kind of changing based off a new technology or a new design aesthetic or based off of where it is, I think just seeing that nuance of change is really fun and exciting to see.
Yeah, for sure. Did you because I know the home you're in now, I'm just curious to ask you. The home you're in now, is this the first home you've bought?
Yes, yeah,
First time homeowner.
first
So
time,
I'm in
yeah.
the same boat. Have you gone down like all of the really deep like architectural digest rabbit holes and
Oh
you
yeah, yeah.
redid your basement and everything.
Yeah,
But
we read so this basement was unfinished. We just had walls, so this room didn't exist. It was just
right.
it's just, playing around, and luckily we have this ability to, work in SketchUp or, CAD and kind of figure out the rooms and look at it it's kind of a blessing and a curse because they spend so much time
Yeah.
detailing it out and where you want, things and how to make the space work most efficiently. And my wife and I share an office when she is work from home. So it's like, how do you build the space? So this room we insulated ceilings and walls so we could, have meetings separate in two different rooms. Like all those little nuances that you can really get into a rabbit hole.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know, but it's also too. It's like I'm just looking at the wood slat sort of like accent wall behind you, and I'm just thinking
Oh
like
yeah, that was a
only a
nightmare.
designer would do this. Like any other sensible homeowner would just put up drywall, but because we're designers, we have to do it. We have to do it.
Oh yeah, I
Know what I
thought it
mean?
would be a weekend project. It ended up being like 3 weeks, I think, in
Right.
total, because it was like sanding each one of these things, and I don't know what the heck I was thinking. Honestly, anybody out there, don't even bother. They
I
have
know. I'm in
they
the
have
same boat.
panels that are like you can buy, but they're so expensive. So I found we were neighbors with they've since moved, but a cabinet company. So we had them cut down each of those different slats, and then I was able to,
Oh
yeah,
wow.
and sand them. And oh my gosh, it was yeah,
Yeah, it's a
it
rabbit
took a
hole for
while.
sure. Yeah,
But
even
I
like
like the aesthetic.
yeah, yeah. No, it looks awesome. Yeah, I'm even in the boat right now. I'm just looking for a rug to put under my dining table, and I feel like it's like there's Pinterest boards and
Mhm.
research and like, well, I need to know about the 300 history of Turkish rugs before I make a decision on buying one of these.
Right.
Like it's like that design. Yeah, it is just that designer curse
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and
But
then you're watching 4 hour long YouTube videos on these rugs learning.
exactly, exactly. And then you're looking at carpet finance reports.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, full
well,
circle.
awesome, man. I'm keeping an eye on the time here. So we'll probably start winding down here, but I'm just curious to ask, like, we're in a new year. It's January. Have you thought at all about like things you want to accomplish this year, or like anything going forward that you have on your your bucket list or your goals?
I think right now it's, I'm really focused on the business and the clients that I'm working with and signing on multiple clients. I have good client that I'm a great client that I'm working with now that I'm like really engaged with and kind of trying to spend most of my time and energy on fostering those relationships. And so that's been a main focus of mine. But I think in the very beginning of beginning of January, I was thinking, hey, it would be really nice to start presenting myself and getting, my name out there or marketing or jumping on having conversations. And then you reached out like the next
Perfect.
day or something. I was like, well, that worked out.
Yeah, yeah. That's
But
awesome,
yeah,
man.
it's so I
No, I'm
appreciate
I'm
you
just
doing that.
glad to
Yeah.
hear that you're doing that because I feel like your work is really great, and I hope that more people can kind of see it, and I hope it gets out there and that you're able to like follow through on a lot of that. Have you gotten to do, I'm curious just because you mentioned like growing up and having this love of cars, have you gotten to do much automotive work? Is that something that you've been I know you did some work with well, I don't know who we should mention who I don't know what's public and what's not, but I know you have done some automotive work.
Yeah, I've done some automotive work but it's mostly it's really product focused. I did some work with
Right.
Rivian, but that was still product focused. And I did work a number of years ago with BAE Systems, which is kind of a military based company or business. But it's I've done some automotive work, but I haven't really gone into it too deeply. Honestly, it's really I focus more on the products, and even related to that, it's more kind of interior development for vehicles. So it's products that might exist within a
Yeah.
vehicle, um, outside, it's not necessarily the exterior design or whatnot, but it is interesting kind of to reflect on my early childhood interests. And now they've kind of broken into two separate interests. And I've kind of maintained or kept them separate, I guess, to some degree.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that's the spot to be as an industrial designer. I always feel like I'm more interested than like the interior and like the thought that goes into that more so than the aesthetics of the exterior. Especially just like with safety standards now and belt lines are so high. Like
Yeah.
I feel like cars just aren't as exciting as they maybe were in like that golden era. I mean, I know people are trying their best, but like I don't know, like the Maverick to me is like a great example where it's just all that thought that went into that interior is like completely mind-blowing and inspiring, like the way they thought about their customer and everything. Sorry, not to go down a big
Yeah.
rabbit hole, but
Yeah, it's easy to chat about, but I agree with you. It's like the detail that they put into it, and even they're even open sourcing certain components so you can kind of add in it is fascinating to kind of see how they're developing the interiors now. And I think they actually are hiring in more product designers or individuals who are like kind of focused on product for interiors. And they've been kind of shifting that over the past 5 to 10 years and hiring more people who are into those design groups.
Right.
So it's a bigger gamut, I think, of experience within the design groups, and you can kind of see that netting out on the interiors.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Huh. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that industry evolves in the next 4 to 5 years, especially with like electric coming in, and I feel like automotive will get really compelling in the 2020s. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, it's honestly been a lot of fun to watch. I really enjoy actually watching the personal transportation space. I feel like more it's just I when I was living in Hoboken, New Jersey for a number of years, so I was biking to work and riding these electric scooters around town, and just it was such a blast to kind of open up this whole nother realm of transportation for me where I wasn't, I didn't have to take a taxi somewhere, a bus. And just seeing how that has changed over the years, it's really opened up that mobility within a smaller community like Hoboken. It's about a mile by a mile long, or yeah, a mile wide by a mile long. And so just like that ability to kind of move around town and use these little personal transportation devices is really cool. And that didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. It wasn't something that you necessarily use. Now there's the one wheels and the electric scooters. They've been struggling over the years, but they still really implanted in some of these big cities. And I had a blast using them.
Yeah, and
And
it's way bigger than I would have like when a lot of that stuff was first coming to market, I probably would have said like, hey, this is a trend, this will be in and out, 2, 3 years. But like it's been way bigger than I would have thought. Like my niece is getting ready to go to college. She's graduating this year.
oh,
And
nice.
as a graduation present, she got one of those electric scooters because apparently that's what most of the kids on campus have. They have those
Hmm,
almost instead of bicycles or car or a
right.
car, like another form of transportation. Like that's become like the kind of the right form factor for like kids who are that age and are kind of on and around campus. Which
Yeah.
is like I like blew my mind when she told me that. I thought that was like really interesting.
Yeah, I prefer to have that kind of transportation because you can stay local, especially in those big cities or big
Right.
college towns. It's like you don't really need that vehicle now with you just grab a rental car if you are going 2 hours away. But for the most part, it's better to have maybe a little scooter or something to get around. And it was interesting too to watch the dynamics with laws changing. Just while I was in Hoboken, you could take the scooter around town full speed, didn't matter where you were. And then there were changes to the rules and regulations, and they had GPS, you know, zones where it would automatically
Whoa.
slow the scooter down when
Oh
you were
wow.
in kind of these public areas, and you all of a sudden your scooter would like slow down to half the speed. And it was a little jarring when it first happened, but you're kind of like witnessing this unleash of these scooters to the community, and then how the laws are changing, and then your experience was adjusting. It was just really wild to see that dynamic shift.
That is
Um,
interesting. How fast do
yeah.
those things go? Sorry, I'm kind of ignorant. I live like way out in the suburbs and drive my big gas guzzling car every day.
Gosh, I don't even remember. I honestly don't remember what the speeds were that we were hitting, but it was, I mean, on the main roads, you felt like you were at least keeping up with traffic for the most part because they had bike lanes that were set up. But it's
That's
slow
wild.
traffic because you're in a city, so you might be doing 16, 17 miles an hour or something. You're not going too fast, but yeah, it was a blast, and it did unlock your mobility within the city in a different way that you didn't really have before.
Yeah, that's so
And cheap.
interesting.
I mean, you grab the app, you scan it, and you're off to the races. So
I mean,
it
even
was a
past that
blast.
though, it is interesting to see it evolve. I feel like it started as like this service where hey, there's a bunch of these things in like a hub on the street, and now I feel like there's almost this whole like consumer market where people are like, well, why spend the $2 every day when I can just buy one for a couple $100? So
Right.
now people they all have like it's all like personal scooters or like the one wheels are probably a good
Hmm.
example. Like that has like a really passionate community around it. But
Yeah. The ones. It it did feel like that. So after maybe 2 or 3 months of them out, it's kind of like when you go pick up a cart at the grocery store, not every one of them is running straight and some of the wheels are,
Right.
shaking or that was the same with these scooters. Like you tell somebody jumped a curb with one of them or something,
Right.
like a wheel wasn't like there was a flat spot because somebody, so over time it made that experience a little different, but
Yeah, you probably don't want to be
owning
going
your
at
own.
traffic speed on a scooter that has like a 20-degree camber on the
Yeah.
on the wheels.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of them would be really slow. So you get on with somebody else, like somebody else would be taking a different scooter. You take off and you look behind and they're not there. You're
Right.
like that guy.
They're in
It's
like the
because,
the racing kind of
yeah, they're
position,
trying
getting
to,
every
yeah,
every piece of
like,
reduced wind drag that they can.
right. Exactly. So then it kind of opened that door and I saw more people buying their own because it was like, okay, now I get it, but I don't want to be dealing with you know, these scooters that have been, jumped off a curb or probably ran into or thrown over a curb or whatever it was, and so yeah, it opened that door and a lot of people bought their own.
Well, that's really yeah. Yeah, it's a wild world. It's an interesting future that we're moving towards for sure.
Yeah,
Who knows what the next transportation will be? Maybe maybe we can get electric Heelys and just kind of
yeah.
roll around that way.
Yeah, then
But
you wouldn't have to worry about it. Be your own feet, so you're
yeah, yeah.
fine.
Well, awesome, man. Hey, I really appreciate you carving out time and coming on. I'm always thankful to anybody who's able to do the show just because I know it is called working late and I do record these late at night. So I appreciate you taking the time. And I guess if people want to reach out or get in touch, whether it's like personal or professional, what's the best way for people to get in contact?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I am doing now is I love to have kind of mentor meetings and stuff. So if you go to my website, cmac.design, I do at the very bottom of the website, I offer 30-minute chats and I'll do those every week. Anybody who's interested in chatting, and it doesn't have to be a mentorship meeting, it could just be a conversation. I love to just have, a digital coffee with people or converse like we're doing now. So yeah, just go to my website, cmac.design, cmack.design, and yeah, at the bottom is a Calendly link so you can get on there and just hit me up. But yeah, all my work's on there and that kind of stuff if you're interested in exploring more.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I definitely recommend checking out Craig's website. It's yeah, really clean and well laid out and a lot of good inspiring projects and work on there. So,
I appreciate
awesome.
that. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Craig. I appreciate it and yeah, have a great rest of your night.
Yeah, thank you for doing this too, Ray. I really appreciate it. It's nice to watch your videos and to have you engaging with the community like this and posting these videos. It gives us a chance to understand what's going on in the broader community and learn about new individuals that I didn't know about and all this new information. So I really appreciate you spending the time out of your schedule to put these
Yeah.
together and put these out there.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I hope to get a lot more. This is episode 10, which was kind of like the goal that I had set for myself. So,
Nice. Hey,
um yeah,
congratulations.
now finally in like a good rhythm with these things. So, yeah, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to doing more and if someone's listening and they have a story they want to share, yeah, please reach out as well. But
great. Yeah.
awesome.
Thanks
All right.
again,
Well,
Ray.
thank you, Craig. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Chat soon.